Seth Jones got his day with the Stanley Cup, and we'll discuss the biggest what if in recent NHL history.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, July 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you follow me on X at Monoman12. That is Nich Fairbanks. You can follow him on X at Prudentia0. Here joining me on another edition of Fairbanks Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Shout out to every day who comes back and gets your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today on the show, we are going to discuss Seth Jones' day with the Cup. We're going to discuss the biggest what if in NHL history in recent memory, and we're going to have a little bit of a mailbag and a little bit of an ask me anything. And at the end, I will discuss a little bit of the verdict from the Hockey Canada trial from 2018. But Nick, welcome back to the show. Grateful to have you here once again. And yeah, Seth Jones got his day with the Cup, bringing it back to his home town of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which that was at the time where his father Popeye was playing basketball for the Dallas Mavericks there. And the thing that stood out about just Seth Jones' story overall is the fact that he doesn't come from a traditional hockey family, and the fact that not only he, but he and his brother Caleb wanted to play hockey, and then they were for Seth's day with the Cup, taking it back to the Children's Health Star Center at Valley Ranch, where he spoke about his development years from 10 to 15 years old on how key that was for him to get to where he is today as a Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, and I think, you could kind of, talk about how his NHL career has gone as well. I mean, he developed very well from the age of 10 to 15 in a non-traditional way. And, he was coming into the draft as possibly the number one overall pick and unfortunately dropped to fourth. Bounced around to a couple teams and then, was given a chance to prove himself here in Florida and fit in, rather seamlessly and played a big role in why they won the Cup this year. So, to the people who are not happy with the trade and everything, I mean, every trade going forward now is all going to be about winning another Cup. So just need you guys to put that in perspective. So, we may be losing some players that you guys may love and everything, but at the end of the day, the overall goal is to win another Cup. So that, players like Jones, Tkachuk, Barkey, Verhaeghe, and all of them can take the Cup out and actually celebrate it with the fans, which, last point I'll make here is that I think it's the only trophy that people actually go around and try to celebrate with everybody with. I mean, otherwise, I don't see the Super Bowl trophy, the Vince Lombardi trophy going everywhere. I don't see the Major League Baseball trophy going everywhere. I don't see the NBA Finals trophy going anywhere, but it just shows that hockey's more of a people sport and everything. And it's awesome to see what Jones was able to do this year, going from where he was with Chicago and obviously unhappy about it to then becoming a Florida Panther and being able to share his experience with everybody in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah, and when it comes to hockey and just the NHL as a whole, I mean, yeah, you duplicate the other trophies in the other sports like the Commissioner's Trophy, the Vince Lombardi Trophy, but the Stanley Cup is the only one where you don't. Yeah, there are two other Stanley Cups that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but the one that was first donated from Lord Stanley. That one was damaged, so that's why they had to create a new cup there. But the fact is that there's only one, and it's only to share around, which it makes it more interesting about when we look at the cup trackers online, which is available to even you guys, the listeners, for when where the cup is going to go next for the celebrations, which is crazy. But you also think about just rinks in general, and just whenever you think about just bringing the community together, uh, rinks are very specific in specific locations, very enclosed. While the other sports, you have an opportunity to go more outdoors when it comes to the sport, like around the basketball court. But hockey, you need to be specific in where you're going, and where and also whenever putting your invitations together whenever you are celebrating with people, which also makes it so special when it comes to eventually coming into winning, and seeing and wanting people to see that iconic trophy. But for Seth Jones, I there was a bit of growing pains when it came to the trade. Obviously, the suspension happened with Aaron Ekblad, having to play up the position where we were talking about. Oh, he doesn't have to play so high up in the lineup the whole time, and then the news breaks, and then he's added to that elevated role. We speak about those elevated role in spurts, and then he goes back. He was a -9, whatever plus minus is worth in the regular season, and then going that and then in going in the complete opposite direction in the playoffs, where he was a +11. And honestly, the big standout is Game 7 of the second round against Toronto. That him, Brad Marchand are two of the biggest factors, the catalysts why the Panthers are able to once again be Stanley Cup champions. And I mean, I still think about Game 7, the whole 25-0 as far as the first shot attempts of the game. The Seth Jones keeping the puck in the end, the timely pinches, those are the things that stood out to me on how the Panthers were just able to put on a clinic, especially in that game in Scotiabank Arena in May.
Well, it's almost as if when you put players in positions that they could be successful or that they can learn to be successful, it almost works out, right? I don't think Jones would be able to make those plays if he was still in Chicago, because he was on the first pair. He was constantly probably trying to cover for his defensive partner, or always defending on bad rushes. Where here in Florida, we are aggressive defensively, trying to keep the pucks in the zone, or at least not come into the Panthers' or defensive zone. And when you have that type of play and you start to adjust to it, it becomes second nature. So you could definitely see how, as he was playing more progressively, that he was getting it, he was understanding the play. And, I think honestly, his coming out game with the Panthers was that Game 7. I mean, he was the one that scored that goal, set the tone, and then from there, Florida just took it to him, and the rest was history.
Yeah. And and Seth Jones, not only not coming from a traditional hockey family, but a person of color as well, playing hockey in Texas. And I mean, I'm sure there's someone looking at this Stanley Cup championship for the Florida Panthers and saying, I maybe he's the reason why that a specific person would want to ask their parents to play hockey as well. So that's another thing of inspiration. I mean, we see it from the most recent draft of Bill Zonin, from the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was inspired by PK Subban to play hockey. So that's another thing there. And there's it just goes to show once again how much the sport is growing, and how much of a community it brings together. And also, speaking of community, before we transition over to segment number 2, there's still, if you do want to get your hockey fix, the 3 Ice tournament is going on in Fort Lauderdale the next few weeks. Next week there will be a good amount of games, and then the Marigold Latam Cup is returning to the Panthers Ice Den / Baptist Health Iceplex next month. So some of the coaches from the 3 Ice tournament: Ray Bork and Guy Carbonneau. So very exciting cast of characters for the coaches for the 3 Ice tournament. Also, if you guys want to watch the 3 Ice tournament, if you guys can't make it, you could also watch it on FanDuel Sports Network Florida if you're unable to make it, and if you guys want to get your hockey fix there. So the sport is growing, and Nick and I, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening, couldn't be more thankful for that. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss a what if. the biggest domino effect in recent NHL history. What happened towards the end of the 2023 regular season that led to the Florida Panthers winning their back-to-back Stanley Cups? We'll discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And Monarch Money has also pointed out to me some of the subscriptions that I kept paying for that I was no longer using. And thankfully, with that, I was able to go to the specific subscription, cancel it, and now it doesn't appear on not only my bank statement, but it doesn't appear on my Monarch Money app anymore. And I get to use that and repurpose it for different things. So big shout out to Monarch Money for helping me out there. So if you want to take control of your finances with Monarch Money, you can use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Segment 2 here on this Friday, July 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Armando Velez here with Nich Fairbanks on another edition of Fairbanks Friday. So wanted to get a little creative here and just wanted to dig deeper into just obviously we're still really in the dog days of summer. It's the off season. So it gives us an opportunity to just discuss more things of what has happened and maybe what could have happened if things have gone differently. I mean, game 81, 2023. I just remember it was the day after the Panthers lost in overtime to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then all eyes were pointing to that Chicago Pittsburgh matchup in Pittsburgh. And then a multi-goal lead. Buddy Robinson, Andreas Athanasiou were big factors in that win for Chicago. It officially put the X in the standings for the Florida Panthers. The game 82 for the Panthers against Carolina was a nothing to play for type of game. But hey, Pittsburgh ended up losing the next game anyway against Columbus in a meaningless game. But I just think about just the what ifs for the Panthers, and just not only the Panthers, but the entire NHL, of just the domino effect of what happened, because the Chicago Blackhawks, with that win, they went from the second highest odds to the third. And one of the balls was because of the third best odds in the lottery, which they ended up getting Connor Bedard. And for the Panthers, obviously, the biggest upset in NHL history against the Boston Bruins, and then ending up going to the Stanley Cup final before losing to Vegas. So I think of a few things about what ifs for this scenario had that not happened. What do you have for what could have happened had it not happened? Because I have a few things on my notes here.
So there's a few things that could not have happened. So I don't know if you remember earlier in that season, but Florida Panthers are coming off a President Trophy season. This team didn't start off very well. There's a lot of fire Maurice chants. There was a lot of we're going backwards. If Florida did not get into the playoffs and Pittsburgh ended up winning that game against Chicago, I don't know if Maurice honestly lasts through his second season, depending on any kind of progression going forward. Just because I think there was so much weight, there was so much expectation going into that season that if you fail to make the playoffs, it's a step backwards. Secondly, I'm not sure if Florida has the core that it has right now. It could have paved the way for some guys to leave. Some were going to leave anyways, but maybe some core people would have left because Bill Zito didn't trade for anybody. He said he liked the group the way it was, and if they had not made it, would he have thought differently? Because he made the big move to bring Kachuk over and got rid of Huberto and Uyghur. So that's one part of it. And the other part, too, is um, what would Pittsburgh look like right now? They haven't made the playoffs, last 2 years, 3 years?
Three.
Three. You have to wonder if this chatter about Sidney Crosby would not be as loud as it is right now, because everybody wants to see him in the playoffs. They want to see him get another cup and everything, and
Oh,
um, you just have to wonder how other franchises would be operating right now instead of trying to be who the Florida Panthers are, who they'd be trying to emulate, and who they'd be trying to, I guess, be right now to have a chance at a cup.
it's funny. I don't have the Sidney Crosby one on my notes, but I do have possibly what could have happened in a possible second round matchup between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins. What could have happened there? Could the Toronto Maple Leafs finally gotten over the hump and gotten to the Stanley Cup final that year? I still think Vegas would have won in a series against Toronto. Mitch Marner probably would not be in Vegas and here's the thing. Maybe Kyle Dubas is still in Toronto as the general manager if they advance far in there. And also, Columbus would have been the third best odds in the lottery, and maybe they get Bedard. But also, that offseason, they mutually parted ways with John Tortorella, and Brad Larson was the interim coach. And would they have gone more of a developmental coach at the time, or would they have gone with Mike Babcock a year earlier than they did before he was obviously let go? He never coached a game for Columbus. Maurice would have been on the hot seat going into his second year. I don't think he would have been fired. There would be more questions on Sergei Bobrovsky's future because he ended that season hurt. Alex Lyon would have walked anyway. I still think he would have gotten a one-way deal. And then the conversation not only about Sergei Bobrovsky, but Spencer Knight, because he was still in the players' assistance program towards the end of that season. It's just like it feel the Panthers would have definitely been in goalie purgatory in a way, with $14 million committed. So that would have been such a big head scratcher. Also, Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad, they would not start the next season on the shelf because of that long playoff run. So that's another thing on just how they would have had a little bit more runway in the regular season to at least get their game a little bit going. Would they have won the cup in 2024? This is where I want to have a one-on-one conversation with Paul Maurice, no cameras, off the record, and just ask him, are you sure that you don't believe in momentum? He talks about a lot in his media availabilities how he doesn't believe in momentum from game to game or even season to season. But I look at this run about them going all the way to the final. And yeah, those are it's a bad taste in the mouth of the players and the fan base. But this is where I'm thinking, Paul, are you sure?
I would think if he gets down to the nitty gritty and talks about the details, I think he'll still say no, but there's lessons that you learn along the way, and I think that team bought into that halfway through the 23 season, just because they were not playing well, and they started figuring it out. And as soon as the trade deadline happened, and Zito basically said, "I believe in this group," that's when I think everybody started to actually buy in. Not that they finished the season particularly well, but they did what they had to do, which then they got that experience, and Zito knew exactly what they needed to do, and they knew what pieces were not going to be there to start the season. So I think he would say it was very calculated in how they were going to prepare going into next season. I don't think it has necessarily anything to do with momentum. Now, you could say that experience and having a game plan going, a better, clearer idea of what you need to do was definitely probably the plan going into the next season and following season.
Yeah, and you think about trade deadline for that 2024 season. I still don't think they would be they'd be extremely aggressive for what the moves they would make. I feel like it'd be still very minor moves on for the edges of the roster. That season they trade for Vladimir Tarasenko, Kyle Okposo. That offseason, Oliver Ekman-Larsson was signed with the Panthers, but would he have signed with the Panthers if they made that run to the Stanley Cup final? And then the Oliver Ekman-Larsson effect going into the Nate Schmidt effect as well for this run. So if that doesn't happen, probably no OEL, probably no Nate Schmidt as well. I thought that Anthony Duclair would have probably been dealt anyway due to him coming off of that Achilles injury and only playing for 15 games after that. But maybe Connor McDavid is also a Stanley Cup champion. We're also talking about him get like kind of in LeBron status for hockey, about just the amount of pressure and then him getting over the hump. Would 2024 have been that year for the Panthers of the year of learning how to losing before learning how to win? Maybe 2024 would have been that year, and 2025 this year would have been the first Stanley Cup for the Panthers. That's another thing. And also the Seth Jones trade, because of what you've already done and your reputation, would Bill Zito have had the cojones to make that trade and bring Seth Jones in to begin with?
So I'm gonna take the low hanging fruit that you just gave me, but I think Connor McDavid is more like LeBron than a lot of people want to say because he's losing finals more than he's winning. Sorry, I'm gonna take that. And yeah, I mean, you don't know exactly what Bill Zito would have been capable of if this team didn't take a step forward the way it did. I mean, GMs around the league probably right now are still like shaking when they see his name on the phone, or like maybe their assistant saying, "Hey, Bill Zito's on the line," and they're like, "Oh, what does he want? And what is he going to give us?" I mean, we already know we're going to get a first round pick, but what does he want? But just there's so many little intricacies that changed, and the league has changed, and this franchise has changed. So it's interesting to see how things are going to develop in the next 5 years because this team is set up to win for the next 5 years. At what point is this window or this butterfly effect eventually just going to close? And, for Florida at least, because I think the rest of the league is still going to feel the reverberations from it. But it's a beautiful story. I've had my feelings on this where a lot of people said, if it wasn't for Chicago, Florida wouldn't be where they were. I'm like, well, a lot of teams could say that too because, they beat Pittsburgh. I did remember reading something the other day where somebody said that they were at a home game back in January and it was against Boston, and had the Panthers not come back within the final seconds of that game and winning it in overtime, getting the extra point would have been the difference of them making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. So you can go down the line and pick any game where Florida escaped with an extra point and they would have gone in. But I think just coming down to the wire where it mattered most, you have to look at the Pittsburgh and Chicago game.
Yeah, I also think of 2018. Had the New York Rangers beaten the Philadelphia Flyers on that Saturday, and the Panthers had that makeup game against Boston after it got canceled with the snow, the rescheduling, which they won that makeup game. What could have happened in that 2018 season with Bob Bugner as the coach? Another one, real quick before we transition. Does Tkachuk's injury in the Four Nations happen even because the target on his back that was from the 2023 run? I wonder if the injury happened on that fight on the opening puck drop with Brandon Hagel. There's a part of me that does wonder if that was the time. Would he have had that much of a target on his back? So that's another thing that we will likely never know. But we could probably try to guess or speculate there. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to open up the mailbag, our AMAs, and also discuss the verdict of the Hockey Canada trial. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Friday, July 25th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, here with Nich Fairbanks here, and opened up some of the mailbag, and for some of the questions, a lot of them are still the same when it comes to just asking about Matthew Tkachuk and LTIR. Go to my previous episodes when it comes to just me discussing Matthew Tkachuk, because I've only discussed it 1,000 times. But I did get an interesting question on the matter, though, about trade partners for possibly Evan Rodriguez and Jesper Boquist. Who are the teams that you see as potential trade partners? And that comes from Luca8913 on X. And I looked at every single team from on Puckpedia that they have open roster spots and they do not have RFAs yet to sign. And I have 6 of them, Nick. Vancouver, Nashville, Minnesota, San Jose, and Anaheim. And this one you might look at, this Puckpedia page you might look at and be a question mark of what I'm about to name. Columbus is another one. But there's a little bit of uncertainty right now with Dmitry Voronkov of his role there and his relationship with Dean Evison. So he's likely to be dealt, but it won't be to the Florida Panthers because the cap hit doesn't fit with the Florida Panthers. So chances are they're not going to be taking anything back. It's to clear some cap. So those are the 6 teams that I have of possible trade partners for both Jesper Boquist and Evan Rodriguez on who can fit there. So those are I looked at those based on numbers. It's funny, this one. I got this one. This one's from Fred Starr. It's like, why can't we have Cuban coffee, croquetas, and pastelitos at home games? And my answer was, Hard Rock Stadium has Versailles, Lone Depot Park has Isla Canarias, Amerant Bank needs to complete the trifecta and bring a Vicky's Baker, which, crazy enough, they're about to open a Vicky's Bakery in Weston. So that's so how awesome would it be to just attend home games and get your croquetas, pastelitos, the whole 9 yards?
So I think Vicky's is positioning themselves very well into possibly getting to Amerant, because if they're going to be in Weston, just a few steps over, you can get into Amerant. I think right now, if they want to market towards a certain demographic, I'll say, they'll definitely put something like that in there, or they'll have like some kind of company to come in and do it for them. So I think that's coming. I think it would be amazing to do something like that during like Vamos Gatos night, or, some kind of heritage night. But I think they need to make that a staple. They also need to put Flanagan's in there somehow. I mean, come on, like, we need to make this South Florida, or at least Florida-esque as much as possible. And then to get back to the other part, as far as like the trade partners, the only teams that I saw that would be possible are Nashville and Anaheim. Number one, I think Anaheim, because they're trying to build an identity and they have a coach who has coached Florida, and I think those two pieces would fit very well. And then secondly, I think Nashville, because they just need a shakeup, because all the players that they brought in have not worked. Why not bring in 2 guys who have won and won recently to kind of change the locker room up and everything? And as you said, I don't think Florida's going to be taking anything back outside of maybe draft picks, but we know Zito doesn't care about those. So those would be the top 2 teams. But I also have to think if Zito would do something for those 2, like especially Rodriguez, because he's been with the team. Does he want to put him in a position to succeed as far as like possibly being in the playoffs, going to another Stanley Cup, things like that? Kind of like what he did for, I think it was Vetrano a few years ago, where he sent him over to New York, even though they had to clear some cap space. So I could see a couple of those trades happening.
Yeah, Vetrano ended it with a bang with the Panthers. 2 goals against the San Jose Sharks on the road right before he got traded there. And I'm looking at some of these places that I listed. I mean, Nashville, you said a shakeup. Plus, hey, no state income tax in Tennessee, so that would help him. So Vancouver, that one's in a desperate need of a shakeup. But hey, they decided to run it back, even though last year was a disaster for them. And I think Evan Rodriguez on the Sharks would be fun with the kids. So I think that is the number one preference. But also, Amerant Bank Arena does have Castaway Coffee, even though it's from South Florida. It doesn't hit as much as those other iconic brands, although they are partnered with the Florida Panthers. But hey, this podcast is not affiliated with the Florida Panthers. So we are an outside media company that covers the team. So we have no partnerships with Castaway Coffee, but just a personal opinion of mine. So before we, so 2 legends this week died this week, and 3 I will include one that is personal for me. Ozzy Osbourne died at 76 years old. Played his final show after not playing a single show for 3 years and sitting down on a chair performing and not taking his pain meds in order to perform the show. And then a few weeks later, he passes. Also, Hulk Hogan. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a wrestling fan at all. I I don't think I've ever sat down and ever watched it, but he's a very popular figure. He's also been he also passed away this week, and also as a former musician myself, by the name of Chuck Mangione, jazz musician. He is also one who passed away this week. I just remember playing some of his music from jazz band when I was in it. Shout out to my trombone and euphonium players out there. But as far as personality, the two people I think of, or just not only personality but physique, I think of Ozzy Osbourne. If it were relating to the Florida Panthers, I think of Ryan Lomberg as the crazy man, I think of the hair flip. Ozzy had the long hair. Hulk Hogan, I think of his incredible physique. I think of Gustav Forsling, how Aaron Ekblad says the players' wives need to stay away from him because of how fit he is. Paul Maurice consistently saying, incredibly fit man. So who do you think of in relation to Florida Panthers when it comes to those two?
Gosh, I mean, this is a really good question. I only watch wrestling sparingly, so I know how important Hulk Hogan was. Him and Macho Man's back and forth was, I think, legendary. Just those interviews. But I would have to say, if I were to pick anybody for Hulk Hogan right now, for me, it's not so much the physique; it's the aura. It's got to be Matthew Tkachuk for me.
Okay.
For good, better, or worse, whatever you want to think, because I know there's varying opinions about Hulk, but
Yes, correct.
you can just say that he's got the personality. He's always around. He's always making something happen. So I have to go with Maddie on that one. And then as far as Ozzy Osbourne, I always think of like an oddball or somebody who's always kind of like, how should I say, like they're deceptively there. And I'm gonna have to
Level
go
of
with
not
Sasha.
giving a bleep. Level of not giving a bleep.
Yeah. As weird as it sounds, I'm gonna have to go with Sasha Barkov. The reason being is that as big of a personality as Ozzy was, I feel like he was more quiet, especially reserved. And when he actually speaks, and you saw interviews with him, I view that same way with Barkov. I mean, very soft spoken, he can be very witty,
Okay.
and you just see that with Ozzy as well. Like he'll bring up a point, and then somebody will ask him, "Well, is that how you feel?" He's like, "Oh, hell no, I don't." And like totally throwing the conversation like on its side. So in that way, I could see it's Barkov.
Yeah, I'm glad we have different answers there, and you made me think a little bit there when it comes to those two and their personalities. Which Ozzy was supposed to perform at Amerant Bank Arena, well, at the time BB&T Center in 2020, but COVID shut everything down there. It was supposed to be in May of 2020, but he did perform at Markham Park in 2018, which I happened to attend that show. I'm very glad to have witnessed that show in person there, which the Florida Panthers, I remember they had a little bit of a tent where you got to spin the wheel and there were some giveaways. So a little bit of promotion from the Florida Panthers there at the time. But all right, no way to easily transition to this topic, but it is the biggest hockey story going on over the last few years actually is the trial from and I do want to say a little bit of a trigger warning. This is talking about sexual assault. So if you guys are not comfortable with this topic, feel free to fast forward here. So the 5 guys who were charged with sexual assault from the Canada, from the 2018 Hockey Canada team, Cal Foote, Michael McLeod, Dylan Dubé, Cal Foote, and Carter Hart. Those guys were found not guilty in their acts. Things did happen, but the argument is consent here when it comes to whether the victim EM decided allowed them to do the acts that they did. So we know that actions did happen, and I want to say that my thoughts are with all the people who have dealt with sexual assault, who haven't felt heard in their lives, and that this verdict for a lot of people, it makes a lot of people afraid of coming out and saying something. I'm not here to say that these guys are actually guilty or actually not, because not guilty does not mean innocent for their actions here. But if they did actually if she did actually consent, I hope that we as a society judge them going forward. But if she didn't, then karma is going to come right at them. And we will see what happens. The NHL has not reinstated them yet. That is right now what from the statement of Commissioner Gary Bettman has said. So that is the latest on that thing. But my thoughts go out to anyone out there who feels like they haven't been heard over their lives if they have dealt with things of sexual assault and those actions. So unfortunately, it's been a long process. The jury's been dismissed. There's been a settlement from Hockey Canada as well prior to the thing reopening. So my thoughts go out to EM wherever you are. And I'm sure that it hasn't been nobody wins in this no matter what here. So that's what I got to say about it. As we wrap up the show, I'll be thinking about EM all throughout the day and and for multiple weeks as I hope we don't forget things. And I hope that if it going forward with these things that with these selfish acts, which we can call them, that if players are guilty in the future, that they do get punished the way they are deserve to be punished. So that's what I got to say about it, Nick. Anything else, or did I say everything that you were thinking here?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot or most of it. There's obviously, some decisions that were made that were not in the best interest of either party. Do we know if certain things happened or if certain things were okay? We don't know. I mean, obviously the evidence suggests one way or another, but I think you said it best. And what I'll do is I'll leave it at that because I have my own thoughts of it, but I don't think right now it's appropriate for
Yep.
this platform.
That's fair, but that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. You can follow Nick on X as well at Prudential0. And yeah, this story will likely be talked about more and more on national channels. So make sure to go to Locked On AHL as we will also cover it there. Other platforms have also been discussing it here. So we'll see what happens with the result of the players if they do in fact get their careers. If they do in fact play in the NHL again or not. So we will see then. But Nick, thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you next week.
See you next week.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.